For Ion, there was another reason to test the memory cards. As one of the most trusted Florida election officials, he had been appointed to oversee the 2000 presidential recount. The recount might have discovered why Volusia County's computers counted backwards to minus 16,022 votes. But when the Supreme Court stopped that recount, Ion was left with unanswered questions.
Someone would have told me that in this system there is a living thing, an executable, modifiable program stored in the same place as the very data which is the most secure in this system. I would say you have to be misunderstanding something crazy.
They had discovered that Diebold's memory cards effectively allowed negative votes.
Well then, go dead. What we're going to do here is modify one card and then bring it to the election supervisor Iyer Sanchez's office. Plug it as the real card in any election to the real election system and run ballots through. And that's the same system which have been used in a number of previous elections. And we'll see that what is the power in the ballot box. This should be just an empty box containing the votes, but it has more capabilities than that. So it's a very simple process. You just add the card in, you run the rewrite program, tell where to find the scanner, and tell exactly what file you want to be put in, and off it goes.
Harry's hack is a variation on stuffing the ballot box before anyone has voted. But this is always suspicious because you end up with more votes than voters. So Hari used 5 negative votes for one candidate and then gave the other one 5 positive votes. So as people cast their ballots, the total number of votes always equals the total number of voters.
They could even look at the code because the code was supposed to be a secret. The certification labs that examine it keep their process a secret of what they do, and even the election officials who buy the equipment are prohibited by their contract from ever looking and seeing how it works.
I don't know what to say. How can you have a company say we want secret software that nobody, even the county registrars who are here testifying on their behalf, is allowed to look at? And when you look at it, you find flaws, and then they say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, so you turn it over to scientific panels. They find flaws, they say, oh, don't worry about it, we corrected it, and that's a lie.
I have to go back in there and take this back by whatever means necessary.
Tragically, around the same time, Andy Stevenson was diagnosed with cancer. He died in July.
Hitler did not take Germany by force. He did not drive in with army tanks. Hitler was elected. Anybody have any idea what the vote count was? What his percentage of the total was? 98%. Kind of go along to get along. Don't piss them off. They've got guns. Eventually, the Germans are loading them up into cattle trailers on the train. Where do you think you're going? On vacation? Where do you think they're going to take you? Well, now you're cold and naked and they're walking you into the ovens where you're going to go to mass execution. Is it time now to raise your hand and say, you know, I tend to disagree with all this? Bang! You're dead. It's too late to complain. You should have complained at the beginning when you at least had a chance. My question to you, and I don't expect you to answer it, just think about it in your head. How bad do things have to get before you do something? Do they have to take away all your property? Do they have to license every activity that you want to engage in? Do they have to be throwing you on cattle cars before you start to say, now wait a minute, I don't think this is a good idea? How long is it going to be before you finally resist and say, no, I will not comply? Period. That's a different answer for each person. Ask yourself now, because sooner or later you're going to come to that line, and when they cross it, what are you going to say? Well, okay, cross this line. Okay, now cross that line. Okay, now cross this line. And pretty soon you're in a corner. Sooner or later, you've got to draw a line and stand your ground, whether anybody else does or not. That is what liberty is all about.
Hood knows a lot about electronic voting because at Diebold he personally trained people to use the touchscreen voting systems. But he started getting suspicious of the company in July of 2002 in Georgia, and now he's blowing the whistle. In his first on-camera appearance ever, Hood says he and other employees covertly inserted software called a patch into the voting machine.
So you actually went into a warehouse and inserted cards into a machine before an election in Georgia?
Yes. The patch that I inserted was sort of a secret, and even those who were overseeing our activities from the state of Georgia were not to know.
And there's no way to tell if those machines were rigged to alter the election because Diebold voting machines provide no paper trail. Those very same machine models were used in the 2004 Maryland election, where Hood says Diebold employees personally tabulated votes in violation of state law.
Yes, I was there. I assisted. I was one of the people who were feeding memory cards into the touchscreens.
Were there any election officials there?
Zero. We had total control of the environment.
People want to believe that doesn't happen in this country. And it's America. We don't steal elections.
And knowing the Diebold system inside and out, Chris Hood says stealing an election is a lot easier than you may think.
It would take maybe a dozen people to fix a national election. A dozen people to fix it. Just a dozen.
Hood says the scariest thing he witnessed while working for Diebold is the lack of security before the elections for voting machines and the memory cards containing critical voting software.
Pre-election, before these cards are actually put in the machine, they're handled in a very sloppy manner. They're not under lock and key. They're floating all over warehouses. They're on the floor. They're on tables. They're everywhere. And that's the real risk.
And computer experts agree. Lax security leaves the voting machines open to hackers who could install voting viruses to steal elections.
I think somebody needs to talk about this. Somebody needs to talk about what's being covered up. And the reason more people don't talk is because their jobs are at stake. Their futures are at stake.
First, they broke into this Diebold voting machine with a hotel minibar key.
There are thousands of keys in circulation, and any hardware store will copy them.
Using a simple memory card, they installed their voting virus.
The total elapsed time is less than 1 minute.
They would never see it.
This year, Curtis is running for Congress against the man he testified contracted his company to write that program. Here's a copy of it posted online for public inspection. Proof, according to e-voting activist Brad Friedman, that programs like these pose a very real threat.
This is not a conspiracy theory because A, it's no longer a theory. It's been proven, you can see it on videotape, and B, it's not a conspiracy because it takes one person.
Some of them are convicted felons?
Well, it was a programmer named Jeffrey Dean.
Yeah.
Who they inherited him when they purchased Global Election Systems. I think it was in 2002. Or
right.
I can't remember the exact year. So this guy, Jeffrey Dean, was working for them, and they kept him on as a consultant. He was programming election software. He had 23 counts of felony theft on his record.
Jeez. And so we have this guy programming software for people to vote on, and yet in most states, convicted felons can't vote.
So Lieberman won this election and his last election with each of his two opponents in this race and the last race getting exactly the same number of votes, which was 448,077.
Wow.
6 years apart. Yeah.
That's statistically impossible.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of just, I'll come back to this in a minute, but it reminds me of there was a race in 2002 here in Texas in Comal County where 3 candidates each got 18,181 votes.
I mean, you really can't call that an anomaly because it's a statistic impossibility.
It is an impossibility.